Hello, our today's lesson is Edgar Allan Poe and his short story The Black Cat. And our today's lesson is for two lectures of 31st of March and 7th of April. So these are our contents according to our syllabi. The first content is, as you see, um, American literature of the middle of 19th century, Edgar Allan Poe as one of the main writers of this period and his literary activities. And the second one is the major themes in The Black Cat, the mixture of crime with the detective narrator. And the third topic is analysis of the text of The Black Cat. So we will talk about these three topics today. And let's have some information about this period of American literature. So, after the American Revolution in 19th century, and after the War of 1812, American writers were exhorted to produce a literature that was truly native. And as if in response, four authors of very respectable stature appeared. The first one was William Bryant, and then Washington Irving, and James Fenimore Cooper, and Edgar Allan Poe. So they initiated a great half century of literary development. And now we are talking about Edgar Allan Poe. He was American writer, poet, editor, and literary critic. And he lived and worked as an author and editor in Philadelphia. His work was shaped largely by analytical skill that showed clearly in his role as an editor, and his Gothic tales of terror were written in accordance with his findings when he studied the most popular magazines of the day. And his masterpieces of terror, The Fall of the House of Usher and The Mosque of the Red Death, The Cask of Amontillado, and others were written according to a carefully worked out psychological method. So, were his detective stories such as The Murders in the Rue Morgue, which historians credited as the first of the genre. As a poet, he achieved fame with The Raven, and in 1845. His work, especially his critical writings and carefully crafted poems, had perhaps a greater influence in France and also other European countries. And Edgar Allan Poe contributed to American literature by introducing darker themes and ideas that would greatly influence later authors. So, as I said, he was also poet, and he was really famous for his short stories. And he is widely regarded as a central figure of Romanticism in the United States and also American literature as a whole. And he was one of the country's earliest practitioners of the short story. He is also generally considered the inventor of the detective fiction and is further credited with contributing to the emerging genre of science fiction. Poe was the first well-known American writer to earn a living through writing alone, resulting in a financially difficult life and career. So I just listed some of his tales and poems. And here you can see the names of the Black Cat, the Cask of Amontillado, the Fall of the House of Usher, the Goldback, Hopfrog, the Mosque of the Red Death, Morella, the Murders in the Rue Morgue, and the oval portrait, the pit and the pendulum, the premature burial. And these are his famous tales. And here on the right side we have the poetry, his poetry, the bells, the city in the sea, a dream within a dream, El Dorado, the haunted palace, To Helen, Lenore, Tamerlane, and the Raven. So please pay attention to the name of these tales and poetry, because I will make some questions for your exam at the end of the term. So try to memorize the names of these poetry and tales, because I'm planning to make some matching tests on your revision too. So but we are talking also other works, so they are also famous, and only just one play was written in 1835 by Poe. It was Politan, and the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. It's Poe's only completed novel. And The Lighthouse is Poe's last incomplete work. But all the short stories are completed. So The Black Cat is written in 1843. It's really interesting, so impressive short story, and also really ambiguous. And they have several themes of these short stories. So the first one is fantastical beliefs. The theme of fantastical beliefs pervades this story. The title itself suggests supernatural elements, for there are various superstitions regarding the bad luck that a black cat brings. In this story, the narrator kills his pet Pluto, his cat's name Pluto, the black cat, by hanging him from a tree. And after the murder of the black cat, bad luck followed the narrator. His house burned down, only one wall remained, and that wall had an impression of the black cat with a rope above the animal's neck. A few days later, another black cat appeared in front of the narrator, and this cat looked exactly like Pluto, except it had a patch of white fur at the bosom, and which later represented the gallows. The events that follow the hanging of Pluto can be attributed to supernatural explanations, for it's a common belief that a black cat brings bad luck. So the superstition of black cat is also the major theme of this short story. And the second theme is fault. The narrator's fault is what brought the black cat back to haunt him. The cat represents his guilt. As the narrator became more guilty, the cat became more realistic. For example, the only time the cat was heard was when the police were searching the narrator's house, at which point his guilt and fear finally pushed him into full madness. And the narrator shows that guilt is a key factor in man's descent into madness, and yet also a vital part of what keeps us human. And the third theme is the divided personality. The narrator experiences a fragmented, divided self. This is apparent not only in the dichotomy between the man telling the tale and the man committing the acts in the late, but also in terms of nearly all of his actions once his perverseness set in, and he vacillated between sanity and insanity, and also between fear and horror of the cat and the impulse to act. and the upcoming days he had nightmares, drunken stoppers, and paroxysms of rage and despair. He killed his cat and then desired another one. He felt poorly for his long-suffering wife, but murdered her without a thought. And the only bliss and peace he had in this story were when he completely lost himself after killing his wife and walling up the cat in the tomb. So he didn't see any fault that he killed his wife, and even after that accident, he felt so comfortable. So the fourth theme is the influence of alcoholism. So it's the effect of alcoholism, bad effects, bad sides. In this story, the narrator describes to the readers the effects of the fiend intemperance. It was due to the increased intake of alcohol that the narrator experienced a radical alternation for the verse. He became more irritable, cared little for the feelings of others, and often used intemperate language with his wife, not to mention the violent acts he committed towards her. And also, he was so rude towards other pets, and he abused the rabbits, the dogs, the monkey, and even his favorite pet Pluto too. We do not know why he was driven to drink, and being drunk did not explain all of his evil deeds, but alcohol certainly affected his behavior and helped him stray further from a unified self. And the last major theme is man's decline into insanity. So, in The Black Cat, the narrator was aware that his thoughts and actions were transforming into a downward spiral. He was aware of his increased irritability, his disregard of the feelings of others, and the unreasonable violent actions he carried out towards his wife. He was even aware that his favorite pet and playmate, Pluto, was falling victim to the ill effects brought by alcoholism onto the narrator. However, for reasons that remain instructable to the reader, he continues his descent into moral degeneration. And also, I have here some questions to you. That how do you think? Does he know what he's doing? So it's really interesting because it's a controversial and problematic question for criticists too. Some of them think that he is not aware of what he is doing, and some of them say that they have some psychological problems, some mental problems. That's why he did all of them. So it's the main question for you. Is he affected with perverseness, and is it a result of the alcohol? How do you think? So let's skip the slide and analysis of the tale. So let's start to analyze. I sent you this short story a few days ago, and I hope that you have already read this short story. And when I talk to you about the analysis of the tale and also themes and symbols, I think it will be more interesting and also clear for you because you almost know the text. And the unreliable narrator. What does it mean? One of the most salient things about the tale is the fact that the readers cannot trust the narrator. He speaks before he is to be put to death, and yet his tone is calm. He speaks of things that are not sane in the tone of a sane person. He admits that he does not understand the things that have happened. Even he could not understand himself. And but he thinks that perhaps someone else can. can understand it. He rationalizes all the things he does, but shows no remorse or understanding of his moral degeneration. The tale he narrates shows him lapsing into evil because of his divided nature, divided personality, turning against reality, rationality, and anyone outside of his own self. So that's why the main analyzing figure is the unreliable narrator at first, and secondly, alcohol. Is regardless of the narrator's moral issues or inclination toward perverseness, he is clearly an alcoholic, and that inability to control his drink affects his thoughts and actions, and that's why he couldn't keep his control. Alcohol is a form of self-destruction for him, but it is a form he welcomes. Poe invites his readers here to see that the alcohol has allowed the drive subject to push all identifications aside and enjoy a new being. And the third one is demonic. Poe studied demonology, interested in the intersection between human destiny and the demonic power. So, The Black Cat is a tale that explores a demonic force symbolized by the cat itself. Not only were cats often associated with dark powers, but there are also other factors that support this claim based on the scholarship of the demonic. First, demons brought about a feeling of oppression or a heavy weight that could hamper breathing, which the narrator complains of. And secondly, the demon can create a feeling of being frozen or paralyzed, which is also an issue for the narrator. And third, nightmares bring feelings of demonic dread. The narrator suffers from these too. And tellingly, this sensation cannot be defined easily because it's a mixture of elevation and horror. And he professes agony over his degradation, but significantly, his sense also thrill to a height of emotion never before experienced. The cat is then a symbol of the narrator's demonic position. He often comments on how smart it is, and he also seems to think it is sapping his energy, that his moral vitality steadily diminishes and is observed by the cat. And the cat is a powerful entity that grows even more powerful as the narrator's power and autonomy wane. So the other main figure is the grotesque figure here. So I hope that you know what is grotesque, because when we learn of Faust and the Hunchback of Notre Dame, you almost know about the grotesque figures, so you have the imagination. And also you have some ideas by Jane Eyre, because they also have some grotesque figures. And so critics see the grotesque as a mixture of the normal, the abnormal, the archaic, and sometimes the modern, the fearful and horrible. So half-made, witty and singular, strange, sometimes mystical. So all of these figures together, they are called grotesque. And Poe uses the grotesque in his work and pushes it into the excessive. But by his doing so in The Black Cat and other tales, the grotesque proves to be a source of both fear and laughter. Some of the details in the story undermine the solemnity of the narrator's confession, as do some of the unbelievable and fantastical elements. And elements of the grotesque in the tale also include uncanniness and repetition, the double, the claim to perverseness, and the fixation on sight. For Freud, you know who I mean, for Sigmund Freud, losing an eye was linked with castration. So for the narrator, who was perhaps overly concerned with his own masculinity, fixation on the animal's missing eye could be telling. And other problem is the gender problem. Almost all of the novels and stories we have this problem, the gender problem and the power of masculinity. The narrator seems here to resort to bursts of hyper-masculine behavior to cover his more feminine behavior. Poe had a subtle message for his male readers. Men's grip on sanity and a masculine identity is more slippery than they might think. That at their most vulnerable moment, a demonic thief in the night might pull back the curtains of their minds and deprive them of what they treasure most, their wanted supremacy. So this is also another figure that you can analyze according to gender problems. And the last one is perverseness, that we are talking about perverseness before in alcohol, in demonic, in unreliable narrator. Here in these figures we talked about perverseness, but now we will talk about this separately. The narrator's excuse for his behavior is the spirit of perverseness, or doing something evil simply because it's evil. However, we cannot take him at his word, and it's more likely that his own psychology is to blame. And the narrator tries to explain away his deeds and rationalize them, which complicates his defense. He is immersed in and infatuated by evil and deliberately chooses to ignore the moral implications of his behavior. He embraces evil more and more, and often rejects the cause and effect relationship between the events of his life. And about symbols, I will just check if it's recording or not. Yes, sorry. So let's talk about symbols. I like in every text to open the meaning of the symbols, and here I just chose three symbols: eyes, the double, and Pluto. And the other, no, it's an else of quotation. So here, eyes. We are talking about eyes, and the movement from obsession toward madness takes a particularly sadistic turn in The Black Cat, when the narrator jabs a penknife into the cat and leaves it with only one eye. So I hope that you remember this impressive scene. So when the second cat shows up, it also is mysteriously missing one eye. It's like a double. So we are talking about these two symbols together. So eyes are a symbol to which Poe returns again and again in various forms of expression in his stories. As a symbol, eyes, especially when contemplated from the perspective of a paranoid narrator, represent the kind of existential persecution that comes from knowing that one is being observed, yet being unable to locate the observer or do anything to escape their gaze. Of course, the symbol of eyes are we can encounter in many novels in the modern language and also in the Middle Age languages. For example, in the Great Gatsby also have the eyes as a symbol, doctor's eyes. And in London Fields and also Money Committed Suicide by Martin Ames, in an English literature, they also have some symbols like eyes. But if it's really changing the meaning according to the writer's style, for example, in Martin Ames' novels, eyes means my eyes are Masonic figures, and it means just I am looking at you, I'm looking after you, and and in Great Gatsby's doctor's eyes are symbolizing the God's eyes, and here is quite different meaning. So don't think that if we are just here analyzing the meaning of the symbol I, it means the same thing, the same meaning in all other texts too. No, it depends on the old context. It depends on writer's style and writer's own opinions about a novel or just a story. That's why the meaning of one symbol can be changed in other texts. Okay, so even the meaning of the colors also can change in other topics, other novels. So don't just stuck on one meaning. Okay, and the second one is a double, the most comprehensive study of the psychology of the double in Poe's canon occurs in his long story William Wilson, if you read, I don't know, in which the plot is driven by the obsessive pursuit by the narrator of his own doppelganger. So doppelganger is a German term. It means double goer. The brother and sister who remain the last of the line of the Usher lineage are also positioned, despite gender differences, as being doubles of each other. So the double that Poe engaged in The Black Cat is a bit more idiosyncratic than his usual employment, as here it's an animal that gets a double. After finally killing off his pet Pluto, the narrator is stunned by the arrival of a near duplicate of the pet. And despite the double being a cat rather than a human protagonist, it nevertheless fulfills the symbolic role of being the agency of internal conflict taking place within the protagonist. Even when he tries to kill the cat to quiet himself, he finds that he cannot really accomplish this, for a double manifests in its place. So, the other symbol is Pluto, the meaning, the name of Pluto. The narrator names his pet Pluto. It's according to the Roman mythology, but modern readers mostly associated Pluto with a former planet or a Disney dog. But Pluto referenced just one thing during Poe's time: the king of the underworld. You know who was it? The king of the underworld. Pluto is Pluto was the god of the underworld, according to the Greek mythology, and the fact that the narrator chooses this name for the cat well before things take a turn for the weird indicates that he may already have had a subliminal predisposition toward seeing the cat as evil, or seeing the world in terms of death from the very start. And I also chose some quotations for you because you should analyze the quotes deeply. Let's start with the first quote. So, for the most wild yet most homely narrative which I am about to pen, I neither expect or nor solicit belief. Here, I will tell you just my opinion, and also I'm open to get your own thoughts about this quote. From the moment the story begins, the reader has a reason to be skeptical of the narrator. In the first place, if the events of the story are to be believed at all, there is only one conceptual setting from which the first-person narration of those events could logically originate. Sorry. And in the custody of the judicial system, somewhere between being arrested for murder and being executed for that murder. The opening line of this story is a bright, shining light spilling outwards in the sky. Do not believe everything this guy is about to say. So the narrator also can't believe what he has done, and he wonders if reader will believe in him or not. And Edgar Allan Poe remains the sublime master of the first-person tale of terror told by an unreliable narrator. That mastery is given one of its finest exhibitions in The Black Cat, and it's also the style of the writer to put the reader into the labyrinth. And when you read, you feel yourself in the labyrinth, and you can't find a way to go out. And this is the really interesting style by writers, and not all the writers can do it. And this is a special style for detective stories, detective novels, and also for postmodern novels. And the second quote is, "From my infancy I was noted for the docility and humanity of my disposition." It's also from the narrator, and I would like you to explain this quote. And the third one, in speaking of his, the cat, intelligence, my wife, who at heart was not a little tinctured with the superstition, made frequent allusion to the ancient popular notion which regarded all black cats um, as witches in disguise. So the narrator is keen to mention that it was his wife who regarded cats as witches in disguise. Perhaps he is telling the truth, and an interesting point, however, is that immediately after bringing up this belief of his wife, the narrator goes on to say that he only mentioned it because he suddenly remembered it. It's not clear what this means, but it's certainly worth nothing in the broader ecosystem of the story's mystery and horror. It may be that he is trying to subtly manipulate the perspective of the reader or listener with an almost hypnotic like suggestion that perhaps everything that happened was supernatural in a region. And it may simply be that it's the narrator that holds this belief, and that in his dissociative state, he's projecting his own belief onto his wife, or it may be something else entirely. So, and the last no, it's not last quote. Our friendship lasted in this manner for several years, during which my general temperament and character, through the instrumentality of the fiend in intemperance, had I blushed to confess it, experienced a radical alteration for the worse. So, at last, the reader is given an explanation for why the narrator turned from the model of docility into an aggressively violent husband and pet owner. And also alcoholic. And in a manner stereotypical of alcoholics, the narrator transforms the process of becoming a drunken loud from one in which he is the perpetrator into one in which he is the victim. And in his account, the inability to stop drinking is due not to his own failure of character, but rather due to the existence of a sentient fiend who even has a name. intemperance. The narrator will go on to present numerous rationalizations for his behavior, never taking responsibility for what he has done. So, and the last quote is, "I knew myself no longer." So, or "I don't know myself anymore." And in the end, it's our last quote. The reader is left trying to figure out which parts of the narrator's story, if indeed any of them actually happened at all. Did the narrator's character really transmogrify so horribly, or was this twisted person twisted all along, and his narrative deception is just one more charge to level against him? So these questions are so controversial, and I would like you to analyze this quote by yourself. And the last slide, I think it's last slide, literary elements. You should know about them because I will make questions for revision. And the genre is the short story, fiction, and horror. And setting and context. The setting is unnamed place, possibly in the USA, and in 1843, as the narrator is waiting for his execution. So you should remember it. Narrator and point of view. Narrator is unnamed narrator in the first person, and tone is diabolic, understated, and abhorring, excited, but mood is gloomy, suspenseful, nightmarish, and erratic. And major conflict, tone and mood, I told, and protagonist and antagonist. So the narrator is the protagonist as well as the antagonist. And major conflict is that what does the act actually mean to the narrator? Is there some dark, malevolent or inhuman aspect to the animals, or can the things that happen to the narrator be explained by natural cause and effect? So this is the major conflict of this novel, this short story. And for seminar, I would like you to prepare the analysis of this short story, and to analyze the symbols and themes by yourself. Of course, I told you my own opinions, but you are open to criticize me, my thoughts. If you have new ideas, please share with me. And thanks for watching. See you on our seminar. Bye bye.